And boom, I should be live now. I've noticed lately that when the recordings of this show go up, I say live when it goes live, but it doesn't seem to, it shows the recording of the show a little bit later than that. So I guess I'll repeat live in a couple of seconds. Still good to see you all. I've just realized I've got the wrong scene on. I probably need this one in order to get the comments. Should be working now. Someone comment please so that I can check that the comments are going up, which that's a little bit worrying. I also see that the that the thing is off center. Oh dear. Okay, well we've got, oh man, Mr. Cordy Chap. So the comments are always like randomly a different color each week, and now I can barely see that dark blue. But anyway, let's do that way because that way works with the cork thingy. And yes. Boom, let's get into it. I'm sorry I've been away the last couple of weeks. I've been sick. I was actually, well, two things. I've been sick and I've been really crushed with work on a project that actually I've been working all this weekend, and it just finished today. So yeah, it actually feels good right now, apart from being able to watch the World Cup final at the moment between England and New Zealand. I've also been able to just enjoy having cleared a really big project out. But yeah, I had strep throat. I just said this is one of those things where it's been rainy and everyone, all the bad air conditioners have been on and whatnot, and it's yeah, it's just been well, that time of year that you get when summer starts. So I'm just going to pause the player over here, and yes, as you can hear, actually no, I hear it myself actually that my throat is still not perfect, but it doesn't feel sore anymore. So anyway, lots happening in the last 2 weeks. I mean, I missed the whole Kim Kardashian thing, the whole resumption of whaling thing, the blow up with South Korea, the election coming up in July 27 or 21. There's not very much going on with that, but I'll talk a little bit about that stuff tonight. General catch up. But yeah, I was going through news in the last couple of weeks. It hasn't been too newsy, so it's probably saved us a little bit for that. But plus, I'll probably look to end a little bit quickly because this is indeed, I've been in Japan for 20 years. I've only actually lived in New Zealand, my own home country, for 13 years. I lived 10 years in Australia, about 2 years in Singapore. I think that all adds up correctly. It's probably a little bit too much actually. That would add up to like 45, and I'm 40, what am I? Geez, I'm 43, so there's some math in there probably. I've rounded up too many times. It's more like 12 years in New Zealand or whatever. But yes, I've been in Japan for such a long time now, and of course you cannot watch cricket here unless like you go to like an Indian restaurant or something like that, which I used to do in Nishikasai in the Indian neighborhood. But yes, I'm completely out of touch with cricket. But when I hear that New Zealand is in the World Cup final, of course I don't really know who any of the players are anymore, but yeah, I'm gonna, well, I can't watch it here. This is the other frustrating thing. I've been listening to it on the radio, but that's how you used to watch cricket. I mean, this is the fast version of the game in the World Cup, which only takes 7 hours. So the first 3.5 hour, in fact it started at 6:30, it is 10:30 here now, so it just took 4 hours for the first innings. In fact it took a little bit overtime, even though they shortened it because of the rain. So it'll be a long night, but yes, provided that the English team does not do to New Zealand what it did to Australia. If they start doing what they did to Australia, just basically thrashing the hell out of them, I might go to sleep early. But otherwise, I will sit up for that. Plus, from midnight tonight, it's Prime Day. I think globally, it certainly is in Japan, so I'm probably going to do that while I stay awake. But yes, anyway, so good to see you all. It's been ages. Let's go through, see who's in the comments. I was actually kind of worried, you take 2 weeks off. I do remember there are years when I do really big projects that I release at this time of year, and I remember no one watching them, and then I realized, oh yeah, 4th of July, like in America, everyone's on vacation. This is the time of year that generally YouTube videos like get the lowest views. It's the worst time of year to do anything meaningful on YouTube. So I'm hoping that the 2-week break was partly like a little bit of a break because of that. But yeah, I am sorry, and I do appreciate that everyone is back. So including Andrea Morboy, we've got Mr. Cordy Chat, Bold Bullets, boy, good to see you. Boom, indeed, good to see you. We've got, who else we got here? We've got Steve from Berkeley, I see, Mr. Cordy Chap, the J Vlog, Sergeant Bilko, Tech Art too, awesome to see you. We've got, who else we got in here? Tech Art too, Andrea Morboy, Dan H, good to see you, Dan H. We've got Tokyo 503. Say hello if you're in the comments, by the way. It's always nice to see who's out there. but an excellent crowd. I think I saw James Kelly up there. Who else is in here? Tai Nakamura, also good to see you indeed. We've got, there's James Kelly, there's Martin Orlando, good to see you. We've got talking about the Kiwis in the World Cup. Hey, there's BLK UNK, who has an awesome idea for an app that we talked about 2 weeks ago, just before I went into my hole of sickness and busyness. But yeah, good to see you, man. Wow, actually it's kind of cool. We've got some non-regulars as well. We've got Olivia D, Quint Rankin, boom again. What about UFC, asks BLKUNK. Is that on tonight? So I must admit, I'm totally out of touch with UFC. But hell, it's the Cricket World Cup. It only happens once every 4 years, and New Zealand's in the final, which happens like once every 20 years. So there we go. Oh, is Adesanya fighting tonight? Seriously? Well, I'll go and turn it on after this. But I'm doing this for the next 50 minutes or so. So hang around if you want to watch that, please. If you're watching your Wimbledon, I see Andrea's doing. If BLKUNK, Bukuk, if you're watching UFC, go watch that stuff. Turn this on in the background. Oh, is that right? I didn't even realize. Well, yeah, honestly, I hardly watch TV anymore, actually. It's just the thing, I'm watching too much YouTube. I'm watching more YouTube than anything else lately. I did watch last night. I actually watched all 4 episodes of the Tokyo Trials, which was one of those things that you saw on Netflix and you think, yeah, I should watch that sometime, for like about a year, and I never watched it, but I finally watched it and it was actually quite good. I do recommend. I honestly don't know a lot of the details about the trials, and it doesn't go into a lot of details about the actual who was accused and about actually how the court cases went. It was more about the personalities and the dynamics of the 13 judges, which was in itself, it was actually really, really interesting, and just really interesting to look at the time period. It was a joint production by Dutch, Australian, Canadian, and Japanese documentary makers, and it was, yeah, if you've got Netflix, I highly recommend it. If you've got Netflix, I also recommend Stranger Things 3, which I watched the other week. I didn't like Stranger Things 2 at all. I kind of liked Stranger Things 1, but I thought it was more just, nostalgia. I really hate, by the way, well, I'm not a big fan of 80s nostalgia, by the way. I remember in the 80s, like when we had to watch the Happy Days, and I liked Happy Days. Happy Days was okay, but like the Wonder Years and so on. And I remember, I'm from the generation whose parents, who grew up in the 60s, are always lecturing us. One, there are more of them than us. And two, they're always lecturing us about how their music is better than ours and how crap music was in the 80s and 90s, which it was because people from the 60s were producing it. But, and basically every pop music song was like a remake of a 60s song, and every, TV and whatnot, there were all of these nostalgia shows. And on the one hand, now that it gets to be like my generation's turn to have nostalgia shows, I'm kind of like, well, yeah, that's kind of cool. And I think that they did Stranger Things really, really well, but at the same time, I really don't like regression. I don't, and I don't like the idea that we're making kids nowadays learn about how suckful the technology and everything was. I mean, there's good stuff about it, but I like to look forward. I feel terrible teaching kids about VCRs and rotary dial phones and stuff like that, and no internet. I mean, I don't want to remember what it was like before there was internet. So for all of that, just for pure nostalgia, I didn't like Stranger Things, but Stranger Things 3, I must admit, they pulled a lot of themes together in that actually really well. I thought it was far and away the best executed of the 3 seasons, and I suggest that. So, yes indeed. Anyway, so I've pulled together stories pretty much from the last 3 weeks. Pre-internet, I don't even know. And geez, I was at freaking university. My first year of university, we didn't have it. I mean, there were like dial-up bulletin boards, but there wasn't real internet like Netscape until I was in my second year of university. It's just insane. Anyway, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do the nostalgia thing because we're in better times now. Yeah, Andrea Mulboy, I do plan to watch When They See Us, and I know the story, and I've seen the reactions to the Netflix thing, and it's. Yeah, no, it's coming up pretty strong, so I do plan to watch that. But yes, anyway, into the stories, into what's going on in Japan at the moment. First thing is in Tokyo, it is rainy season like hell. It's been like the darkest, least sunshine in Tokyo in like 50 years or something. I actually quite like it, just simply because I know what it's going to be like when it stops. It's just going to be horrible and too hot, and you're not going to be able to get away from it. So, yeah. Olivia D, hey, good to see you, by the way. I see you say hello. I'm not sure if I caught you before. Thank you, everybody. And remember, as always, if you've got a comment that you want me to respond to an @MarkHikoSimon, and it will hopefully catch my eye, because I've got the chat thing on the side here beside the screen. I will look over here and I will stop and I will respond to your comment. But otherwise, I'm just going to charge ahead with the topics now. But thank you for joining anyway. So let's get into it. First of all, well, this one, there's not very much to talk about. There is an election coming up. Abe is not popular. He's raising the sales tax. He's not really doing anything that anyone likes. It's just simply an election. The only party more popular, like the polls, I should have actually put one of the polls in here. None of the above. The number one party is like 35% is LDP. But 39% of people say that they don't want to vote for any party. And the number two party is the Constitutional Democratic Party, which is basically the smouldering remains of the opposition that was in government before. And then 5% is Komeito, which is the Soka Gakkai Party. I mean, you're not supposed to say that, but they are. And they're like a coalition partner of the government, and they're the number three party, and they're like 5%, and then everyone else is like 0.2% and 0.1%. There's a huge charade of an election, but there's really nothing happening. In terms of the issues, Abe is being assertive that this time this is like the third election that he's campaigning now since he came into power. He is saying, no, seriously, he really does want to change the constitution now, which is practically impossible. You need 2/3 of the vote in both houses, which he might get the votes for. But on top of that, you need a public referendum. And here's the thing, even though the LDP is winning by default the lower and upper houses, he's never going to get the support in a public referendum for, sending people into wars again. I mean, what country would vote in a referendum to have wars? I mean, I realize in some circumstances that might be a thing. So he's kind of like this whole retaliation against Korea lately, and he's doing some kind of feel good and nationalist kind of things. But that's all that he's really doing it about. He is kind of, the one thing about Abe I am enjoying, that he is kind of trolling the opposition, that he won't call them the Constitutional Democratic Party, the new party name. He calls them the Democrats, and he reminds everybody what a disaster the government was under the Democrats. He only refers to them under their former name. I don't know, I guess it's like calling them Cassius Clay, except they can't hit. I mean, seriously, like, my grandma could probably beat up the Constitutional Democratic Party. This is the problem. The Constitutional Democratic Party, to the extent that they're there, they're saying, hey, people's wages are going down. I mean, this is it. Wages are going down, inflation's going up, economics isn't working, the pension system is a disaster, and he's still walking away with the election while raising the sales tax. It's kind of like, it's a measure of how disillusioned people were with what a disaster they were, and they were a disaster basically because as soon as they got into power under Naoto Kan, who was Prime Minister during the earthquake and whatnot, the Democrats just fell into infighting and just basically breaking all of their promises and selling out to the bureaucracy. That's what they did, and no one wants to trust them anymore, and I don't trust them either, but I want there to be any kind of an opposition. So anyway, that's what's happening with the elections. For a really good summary, this is someone else. This was a recommended article, which I now see is written by Gregory W. Noble, University of Tokyo. But there was someone else who recommended this that I thought claimed writing it. There are a few good commentators anyway, so it's worth reading and figuring out what's going on, but there's not a lot to it. The first and last time you're ever going to see a Kardashian on the show. I'll talk about the kimono thing briefly. Look, for me, I'll say it, that I think appropriation is kind of BS. I mean, so there is bad appropriation, right? There is, in my own country, when people used to dress up in, white people would dress up in grass skirts and make fun of Pacific Islanders or African people or whatnot, blackface and whatnot. I don't know that that's appropriation. That's just being an asshole, if you ask me. And yeah, that's wrong and bad and shouldn't be done. But the idea of like mingling cultures and adapting to cultures that don't start out as being your own, the idea that if you're Asian, you're not allowed to perform hip hop music, or the idea that if you're I mean, how does that even work? The fact that we all come to Japan, I mean, appropriation is basically is a big part of assimilation. And the idea that your that your appearance dictates how much you're allowed to assimilate or what culture you're allowed to identify with. is stupid to me. But that said, yes, I think with this, I thought exactly what you're saying, Mr. Cordy Chap, that, I thought this was fake engineer outrage. When I saw a BBC article raise this for the first time that I was aware of it, and I didn't see this anywhere, saying that Japan is outraged at Kim Kardashian, calling her, sort of old ladies tan underwear kimonos. That Japan was outraged. I was like, dude, this is the first I've heard of it, and I've got, I follow RSS feeds, I follow, social media, hot topics in Japan. I haven't seen this anywhere. So this sounds fake to me. This sounds like engineered rage. To which I got a lot of, mostly non-Japanese expatriate foreigners living in Japan, mostly women who are obviously really into kimono, and I'm not hooked in with the kimono community, so I acknowledge this might have been a big outrage in that community, and it simply was me and my sound bubble not hearing it. But I got angry tweets back saying, I'm outraged that you are not outraged at this outrage. And I was kind of like, well, I'm just saying the way that I see it. Maybe it's me. And I was assured, oh yes, it's you. I know many Japanese. I've lived here for 4 years. All my Japanese friends are outraged. I don't know a single outraged Japanese person from this whole story. Nobody gives a shit. But sure, I can acknowledge there are probably some outraged people, and certainly I saw them, although they were all foreigners. And this is the other thing about the internet nowadays. People enjoy these rage festivals, right? They enjoy being angry, and it's kind of like I see it, and I just find it off-putting. I feel an instinct towards, this is me being a grumpy middle-aged person, that when I see this, I think, yeah, that's bullshit. I realize it's how people bond. It's like a music festival, right? Being angry and self-righteous at stuff. I don't give a crap about Kim Kardashian, and I don't give a crap about her calling her stupid underwear kimonos, but to the extent it was kind of funny seeing all the fake marketing and seeing her withdraw the plan, and the fact is that there are 108 other US trademark office registered items using the word kimono in them, including a brand of condoms. So, I'd say that the horse is pretty much bolted on this whole issue, but to the extent we got Kim Kardashian, yay for us. I hope I never say that word ever again. Frankly, of all the judgment calls, and people still carrying on about what a terrible judgment call it was, well, it's pretty bad, but it still isn't as bad as her father backing OJ. So, I'm still willing to I'm not going to give her a part. I just don't want to hear that name anymore. That's pretty much it. I enjoyed the Netflix show, by the way, the movie recreating the whole O.J. Simpson thing. That was crazy. And I was, watching that when that stuff happened. And it was even crazier that I remembered, oh, Kim, oh, no, that's right. Yeah, that was a bit much. Anyway, I realized that's way late, but I was sick, so I'm talking about it now. Oh, this is funny. Well, basically, Trump, running the presidency like it was being run by a VH1, reality show with mischievous directors just looking to start fights and make trouble everywhere. So Trump's there basically. He's making friends with enemies. He's making enemies with friends. He when the British Prime Minister, when the British ambassador called Trump stupid and his administration stupid, Trump called him stupid back, and then he got fired. I mean, the stupid ambassador of a stupid country calling the stupid president of a stupid country stupid got fired for it. I don't know. So there's been lots of dramas like this lately. Of course, Trump, he hasn't been bashing so hard on Japan. Of course, he wants Japan to stop selling those Honda Civic hatchbacks that they just started importing into America that are stopping US sales. They want to restrict this number of cars that can come into America, and when he found out, was probably shocked to learn that they're actually using Americans to now manufacture the cars in America. He was like, well, we should ban cars that are made by Japanese factories, companies in America, because he wants to. It's a national defense security interest to actually have GM and Ford be stronger than Japanese companies. So while he threatened hundreds of thousands of U.S. jobs for working for traitorous Japanese companies, by the way, one of America's biggest defense customers is the Japanese government. He's basically also, sticking everybody up for money. Japan pays 71% of the cost of hosting U.S. forces in Japan. That is to say, the all the costs associated with running the bases in Japan, which Japan is one of the biggest base hosting countries outside of the US in the world. It's practically, I mean, it was described as Prime Minister Nakasone in the 80s as an aircraft carrier for Japan, for the United States, and that's not an exaggeration. The United States' capacity to engage in the Korean War and the Vietnam War, basically Japan was a munitions factory, it was an R&R center, and it was a near deployment area from which they could basically go and drop forces in and out of East Asia. All of US, particularly in Okinawa, the entire United States security presence and interests in Asia, which by the way link, they're like a connecting dot between the Middle East. For example, here's the thing, if America marched out of Asia, all of its oil which comes to America from Saudi Arabia, from the Middle East, basically anyone who's got control of like Indonesia, theoretically you probably could go around Australia, I guess, but between China and Indonesia, you could blockade half of America. Which is why America has always been very adamant about keeping a framework basically of all the Southeast Asian countries, sort of around China and around Russia, not letting them break out into the Pacific, and Japan's always been fundamental to that, to America's own perception of that. It's like the first barrier between them and anarchy, and to keeping the economy and the energy economy flowing. So America's not occupying these bases in Japan out of the goodness of its heart. But Trump has reduced the whole thing, as has happened at times in the past when politically they felt like, hey, we should make the Japanese pay more for the bases. Of course, Japan didn't have any say in the bases. Japan attacked America and lost the war, and didn't have any choice. Those occupation bases were converted into forward troop location bases, and the result of that now is that Japan, America has tens of thousands of troops in Japan, and Japan pays 71% of the cost of those troops. But Trump keeps saying that Japan has to pay more for it, and Japan has to contribute troops. And this is another interesting point, which is actually right on Abe's agenda of getting Japan back into wars. This whole, you talk about fake news, by the way. I still don't want to get all conspiracy brother on you, but those two Japanese tankers that got attacked in the Straits of Hormuz of Iran, that America immediately blamed Iran for and tried to start a war with Iran over, that's dodgy as hell. Iran and Japan are allies and friends, warm friends. Japan buys its oil from Iran. Iran has no reason whatsoever ever to attack a Japanese oil tanker, ever. So that's some fake shit, honestly. I mean, I can't even imagine. I'm not saying that Iran's not above attacking ships in the Persian Gulf or the Straits of Hormuz, but even in Japan, everyone was calling bullshit when the Americans said, "Oh look, Iran attacked a Japanese tanker," and at the same time was saying that Japan should contribute forces to fighting wars and supporting in the Middle East, or it should charge them more money. Basically, the whole idea that America is turning itself into a mercenary thing, well, if people call BS on that, which is probably going to happen, the US is going to lose all of those bases. That's just what's going to happen. And those bases are not there. I mean, Japan's learned how to live with it pretty well. Japan's done very well out of the arrangement. And certainly I don't think that the LDP, least of all, wants the US bases gone. But, and remember when the Democrats, we talk about what a disaster they were, one of the things that they did was they suggested politely that US relocate some of its forces from Okinawa to Guam. And Hillary Clinton, destroyed PM Hatoyama over that. I mean, he had to back down fully from that. He lost the election. He lost his leadership over that a couple of weeks later. So, America's asking for more money. That's a bunch of BS. Japan pays more for the troops on its soil than any other country. I mean, even more than like Saudi Arabia, from what I understand. And are there even US troops in Saudi anymore? I don't know. But Japan pays a shit ton. And, this is just more rubbish. But we'll see. Anyway, Japan started whaling again. This was another thing that happened. Glad to see people are enjoying the tennis. I must admit, that makes me curious how the cricket is going. Very, very, very quiet. Oh, I turned it off. That was probably a smart move. I'm not going to look at the cricket. Whaling. Japan started whaling again, which I know sounds terrible. But it's actually, if you're a whale conservationist, this was the best thing that could have happened. I'll tell you why. Because for the last 30 years, for a start, no one in Japan really likes whale meat. The only people that eat whale meat are whalers, and there's like 50 of them in the whole country. The towns, so basically they've sustained whaling in order to sustain these jobs. because the whole idea was that the embargo was supposed to be temporary, and because there was this scientific whaling exception, the Japanese government funded going down into the Antarctic with these massive boats and killing something like 1,000 whales or something every year, and bringing it back, and it was all government subsidized, and they had all this whale meat that they just had to give away. Because it's actually in the rules of the scientific whaling that you're not supposed to toss it out like you toss out the dead whales like garbage. You're supposed to try to use them as much as possible. So some people would come and point fingers and say, "Oh, see, Japan's eating the meat," which means that it was they were actually doing it for whaling and they weren't doing it for scientific research. But it's actually one of the rules, and it makes sense to me. You shouldn't treat live or dead animals like garbage. It was actually right that they used all of this meat. But the point is, they were kind of giving the meat away. No one wanted to buy it, and Japan kind of called BS on the hypocrisy around the idea that even for non-endangered species of whales, that somehow they're like super animals that we should treat like human beings and not allow anyone to eat, no matter what culture, because our culture disagrees with it, even though it's not their culture. This whole kind of angry white person kind of thing, which basically became this big cultural fight in the IWC. It went from being a conservation argument. No one in Japan has ever advocated hunting endangered, well, at least not other than for counting them, which I must admit is a funny way for counting them. But no one's ever advocated commercial whaling of endangered species, from Japan. But there are a lot of non-endangered species of whales that Japanese argue just logically doesn't make sense. If people want to hunt them, and they can hunt them on quotas that are sustainable, they should be allowed to do it. And the debate's always been, yeah, but whales are cute. I saw Free Willy, I cried. It's like hunting Lassie or Bambi, or don't do it. And then someone reminds him how great venison tastes. So it's a cultural thing. In the end of the day, the Japanese government, though, has spent tons and tons of money on this, basically just over kind of defending its culture, even though no one in the country really eats whale meat or gives a crap about this, other than most people generally think, yeah, it does kind of suck to be, lectured to by white people about what they're allowed to eat, that riles some people up, but not so much that they actually want to eat whale meat. They just want, the right to it. So the result of the resumption of commercial whaling is that Japan's only going to do nearshore whaling. It's going to be the quotas that they've set up for non-endangered species, quotas of less than 1% of total populations. It's going to result in about 220 whales being caught, which is like a quarter or something of the number of whales that were being killed down in Antarctica, close to Australia before, which is pissing off the Australians. So they're away from Australia, they're killing 1/4 of the whales, and here's the thing, here's the best part about it if you're a conservationist and a capitalist. The industry will live and die now by how many people want to eat mercury-laden, metallic, crappy sort of sea cows. And I've tried it myself before. I've had whale tutster. You can occasionally get the meat in restaurants and stuff like that. My friends were ordering it and they said, "You want to try it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, let's try it." And it was like beef schnitzel. It was deep fried meat, and it tasted like beef schnitzel. And I ate it, and it wasn't like great tasting. It wasn't bad tasting. I wouldn't go out of my way to eat it again. And that's kind of how most people are. Even when schools were like putting it into school lunches in Japan to make sure everyone would get to try and be familiar. The only reason Japanese ate whale after the war was that Japan doesn't have a lot of cows, and there weren't a lot of sources of protein other than like natto in Japan. So it was a good way to get protein for people. I mean, you think about it, English and Australians and Americans were worse. We were killing whales for like throwing away the entire bodies and just using them for the oil, for lamps and stuff like that, for street lighting. So I think we're a lot better on this. However, oh, very good. Thank you, Dan. That's some good news there. So in any case, white people are hypocrites. In the end of the day, what's going to happen is the industry's going to die a natural death. The government's not going to spend tax money on it anymore, and they're not going to go and have these boring, repetitive cultural fights in the IWC, which frankly isn't the IWC anymore. It's not the International Whaling Commission. It's the International Commission for spreading white values about what dark-skinned people should eat. That's what it's become. It's not about conservation anymore. So the rest of the world that doesn't want to do this, and Japan is going to respect conservation values, and this is going to die a natural death because people in Japan just don't want to eat the meat. The meat isn't that good. That's the point. So there's going to be, and to the extent that people in Japan will eat the whales, the numbers will probably just go down from 220 to 30 to 10 or whatever. And there's just not going to be any money in it. And that would have been the quickest way to kill this whole industry. decades ago. It was only sustained by the scientific whaling, which was funded by the government, so that's good news. If you're into fonts, why was whaling a thing after the war? What about fish? Well, it was whales were cheap. I mean, the whaling industry was kind of big, and it was just an efficient way of getting lots of protein. Plus, whale meat's actually quite a lot like beef. I mean, they are mammals. Good question. I don't know why necessarily it was just big, cheap, kind of disgusting tasting meat. That's pretty much it. I mean, after the war, even in New Zealand and Australia, that people would eat tinned whale meat as a side product of the oil that they would drain from them. So it was pretty. I mean, again, this is how the whales became extinct. That it was just kind of again, whale meat wasn't uncommon after the war, even in Western countries. But this is the problem. They were so easy to hunt that we made them extinct. So anyway, fonts. I love fonts. There's the site Collis.com. Every half year they release like hundreds and hundreds of free fonts, and they demonstrate what they look like. And fonts are like clothes. It's like to me, if I was going to make you like in Stranger Things 3, there's that scene at the shopping mall where they put on lots of 80s fashions and triangular, bright blue sort of earrings and dance around in the dress with sort of all that sort of stuff. If that was me, I would do that with fonts. I would just I dance with fonts. These are just awesome, and I don't care I don't care how people judge. So yes. These are fonts that work with kanji. If you're into Japanese, these are not just any old fonts. These are fonts that work with Japanese. Collis.com. Check out the 1919 second half of the year free fonts. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of awesome fonts. I love fonts. Fill your boots. They're free and they're awesome. Martin Sebula, good to see you. I hope I pronounced that right. I'm pretty sure I didn't. In English, you'd say Sebula as a C. With a S kind of C, but it could be different, I realize. But good to see you anyway. Comic Sans, hey, I've expressed hate for Comic Sans, but to be honest, I'm okay with Comic Sans actually. A rap about fonts, Hiko Simon, Andrew Mowbray. Yes, thank you, Marcin. Your favorite? Wow, that's going a little bit far. Let's not go crazy here. YouTube announced some changes to its infamously awful copyright system. Now, whenever someone makes a copyright claim, like you've got like background music or some BS that someone's trying to take your monetization, they have to actually timestamp the video and identify exactly when it is. And they're also going to introduce editing tools, which will mean that, for example, if you're walking by a radio playing in a restaurant, playing like 5 seconds of a pop song, and BMG Music or Warner Music or Sony Music or one of those scumbag music companies wants to try to demonetize your videos, or take the revenue and the monetization for your videos from walking past that, you're going to be able to actually they're going to be required to say exactly what part of the video that is, and you can either like go over it with music or you can trim it out of the video, and you can screw those guys. And you can remember that any of the music I put out, not that it's very good, but you can of course feel free to insert that, or it's all free. That's all free to use, and I'm not gonna sue you guys or monetize your stuff, so you can do that. But anyway, it's an improvement. It's never going to be perfect because media companies, are basically extortion rackets. But yes, YouTube is rolling with it and slowly improving its system to at least stop creators getting screwed over so badly, and I think that is a good thing. If you're into hotels, and who isn't at some point, if you're going to the if you're going to Haneda Airport, I actually have a friend who is like a flight simulator maniac, and apparently even when a flight is available from Haneda or Narita. Narita, by the way, both are theoretically Tokyo airports, but Haneda is in Tokyo. Like from central Tokyo, it's like a 30-minute, 20 to 30-minute like train ride or cab ride to the airport. Narita's like 2 hours away. It's in freaking it's a prefecture. It's in Chiba, but it's practically like 2 prefectures away. It's so far away. And it's ridiculous that they call it Tokyo Airport, but yet my flight simulator friend insists that he always buys flights that go through Narita. He'll travel all the way out to Narita because apparently somewhere in Narita Airport there is an awesome flight simulator that you can book and you can fly for a long time. He highly recommends, if you're into flight simulators, go to Narita Airport like 3 hours early and go and find a flight simulator there, and apparently it is awesome. However, if you're really into flight simulators, check that out. An enormous full-size flight simulator in a hotel room in a hotel that is attached to Haneda Airport, which makes me think, one, this is an awesome option for people who love flight simulators. I mean, the fact you can get a room where you can just like play on one of those like all night. And the second thing, I probably shouldn't even say what I'm thinking for the second part of it. Movie productions, just if you're into weird stuff. I mean, I'm going to stop it right there. But anyway, the possibilities are endless. The fact it's actually in the airport as well, it's a little bit weird. But it's a hotel room with a huge flight simulator. That's pretty cool. And if that's not good enough for you, there is this. For $9,000 a night, you can actually book an entire castle in Nagasaki. And this in itself, I mean, okay, $9,000 seems expensive, but first, and plus I don't think it would actually be that comfortable either. It'd be probably kind of cold and drafty and creaky and weird. But okay, if you're like a Dr. Evil type person who flies first class, that's the cost of a first class air ticket, right? So it kind of makes sense if you're the kind of person who can afford first class air tickets, and there's a few on every flight, right? That's the first thing. But the other thing, you think about it more than that. You think about how much it costs, like to rent something for a wedding, or how much people will spend on, for example, a corporate event. Like a company trip or whatever, where you go and stay in a ryokan for 30 people, and how much that adds up to. For $9,000, being able to book an entire castle, like that's pretty sweet. Like you could shoot movies in there, you could do like events in there. If you're going to split it among more than one people, I think this is actually quite an awesome idea. So that's pretty cool, actually. So where do you go, Nagasaki Castle? Plus, Nagasaki is a lovely city. I know people associate it with the A-bomb thing, but actually, it's a really, really interesting city. It's got a very Western history. It's very Christian. It's actually ironic that the Americans chose to A-bomb it, because it's actually like the most Christian and most, it used to be where the Dutch came into Japan through, and it's a fantastic city to go to just in any case, and now you can go stay in a castle there, so that's pretty cool. If you are German, apparently, so you may be, in fact, if you know Japan, if you're associated with Japan, you're probably familiar with the fact that every country has, or not every country, but most of the big countries have a kanji for shortening, for basically back in the day when they liked to use kanji for everything. They would use kanji to shorten for countries. So, for example, you could say America, or you could say, they'd shorten it to whatever country. And, America's like rice country. Britain probably has the best one. Britain somehow got like, honourable country. They got like the best kanji of all. France somehow got Fu, which is like Buddhism country, which is a bit strange. China got what it calls itself, the middle country. But even Australia. Australia got an awesome one. Australia, if you're not aware, got bountiful country, which is actually, practically what the Australian national anthem is. Actually, And actually, it's funny, they don't call themselves Gokoku either. They call themselves Goshu, like the bounty. I just realized it's Bounty Island. The kanji for Australia is literally Bounty Island. That's extremely appropriate, like from all sorts of different angles. Some countries did really well in the lottery of getting kanji, go in terms of, plentiful and abundant. The one for Germany means strong and standing alone, doku, which a lot of people have always said, well, that's exactly how we think of Germans. Although some people pointed out specifically, that's exactly how we think of Hitler. There's a German self-appointed kanji expert who lives in Hachioji. Hachioji is still in Hachioji, Rock in West Tokyo. It is actually in Tokyo, for the other Tokyo people that say that Hachioji isn't in Tokyo because it's too far away. It is in Tokyo. Tokyo is like a really long pointy shape, and at the far end of the point, far away from the 23 wards, metropolitan wards, is Hachioji City. It's where all the bolsozoku, where all the night races, the drifters, and so on, and people who can't afford to live in the metropolitan area live. And I used to live out there, and what can I say? He lives in Hachioji, and he's an angry German kanji expert, and he's like, hey, that German kanji is discriminatory. What can you do? It is actually apparently the same kanji that China and Taiwan used to describe Germany. So some were saying it's not our fault, but then the discussions on the internet really got into some discussion about other countries. Some people laughing, it's kind of funny that they call France the Buddhist country, even though it's got, no Buddhism at all. I didn't actually know that Egypt, I can't even read that, but Egypt has a cool kanji, which is like kind of funny. Is that like pan or something? I don't know what that even means. Looks kind of cool. That's an unusual kanji. This person's saying, yeah, it does make me think of Hitler. Which I suppose would be a good reason to get rid of it. Someone's saying, how in the hell did England get away with getting such a cool kanji? Like, well, that's not totally not fair. But yes, basically people saying, yeah, you can't start changing the kanji now, it's too much. Oh, go, somebody points out Australia there. Go, kakui. Yes, it is. It's kind of funny just getting into the impressions that Japanese have of the kanji used with different countries. So what do Japanese call New Zealand? Well, actually, I've heard a suggestion of people using kanji for New Zealand, for sheep, yo. Another one of using the kanji for milk, new, like as in New Zealand. But we haven't actually gotten an official one. Although I know that there's a Japanese community in New Zealand that was lobbying for it, but of course New Zealand itself isn't very big, let alone the Japanese community in New Zealand, so probably no one's ever going to pay attention to them. But yes, we have sheep. So there we go. Maybe the last story, indeed the last story. Oh, second last story that I have is Johnny from Johnny's Entertainment died, and you've probably heard this in the news, and it's kind of like basically Japanese media. He's like, I can't really put this in a complimentary way. Johnny Kitagawa. Interesting life story. The best article was this Peter Tasker article written in the Nikkei Shimbun, where he's actually, most Japanese media won't say anything about the controversy around him. They'll only say that he's become the most dominant person in the Japanese entertainment industry in Japan, which is true. I mean, he's so dominant that even when he's dead, people are afraid to actually publish the fact that he was accused multiple times of sexual abuse of the boys that would stay in the dormitory for his talent agency. Parents would send their kids off to become idols like SMAP or Arashi or V6 or whatever. And they'd be groomed they would be groomed, pun intended, they'd be groomed to be not only pop stars, but to be actors or variety show guests or whatever. And basically these people, there's this whole machine that you'd buy their CD, they'd appear in a drama. These people had become so popular and so in demand that basically if a TV show ever wanted to say anything critical about release any scandal about anybody from the department, from the agency, or release any scandal information about Johnny himself, the head of the talent agency, he could just threaten, say that we're going to withdraw all of our talents from being on your TV network, which is like dropping a nuclear bomb on them. So they would always basically go along with, even when he was being charged criminally, including by members of that group that's on the screen right now, being accused of sexual abuse. So he's a bit like MJ, in fact way more powerful than MJ. Some other people, some people are angry at the fact he kind of seems to have gotten away with, some crimes against children in his care, which is pretty abhorrent. And the idea that people would send their kids off, to me it's hard to get past that. But going past that, the other thing is that he really defined J-pop. I mean, if anyone can be given credit for inventing J-pop as it is, it's really Johnny Kitagawa. And yeah, the model that he designed for it is kind of funny. Korea adopted for K-pop. They obviously imitated J-pop in the beginning, but they've gone and transformed it into something very different to J-pop. And it's really interesting what the difference is. The best example of it that I've raised on this show before is how there was a big joint K-pop, J-pop like event in Korea where they would have like a battle between these Korean K-pop girl groups and the Japanese J-pop groups, going one after another, the idol groups. And it immediately became really, really clear that the Korean groups sing perfectly, look perfect, and they dance perfectly, like almost like too perfectly. Like they train for years, like military style training, to be perfect at singing, to be perfect at dancing, to be everyone in sync. And yet in Japanese J-pop, the idea of J-pop always is that the idols in Japan are supposed to appear accessible. They're not supposed to be so perfect that they seem unattainable, which is why by design they deliberately do not pick people that are too good looking. They deliberately do not want people to appear to be too good at dancing. They like it to be a little bit loose, and they deliberately choose people that can't sing. In fact, it was almost like a dare that they were actually using people that, I mean, not when I say can't sing, I don't mean like a bit of auto-tune and fixing like you get in the US right now. I mean like tone deaf, like Nakai. Is he in this photo? I've talked about Nakai before. But it's like most idol groups, like SMAP here, for example, will actually have a member who is deliberately always out of tune. I mean, he literally is out of tune. And it's to make them feel like they could be people that you would like see at school or something like that. They actually make them stupid on purpose, and he would like just do it as a screw you. TQ Sam, no, I will not. Screw you, man. I was born this way, and I'm not ashamed to be handsome and smart. So there we go. So yeah, he basically he invented this model, which was wildly successful, so long as it was only in Japan, of these people that were basically kind of stupid and not very good at singing or dancing or acting, but would do everything. And it's really apparent when you see how the Koreans have like taken that model and gone and like taken it and like perfected the talent aspect of it. That's why they've been globally successful, and that's why J-pop won't be globally successful. But it works in Japan, and his impact is really interesting. Some people have been lamenting it being a negative impact on pop culture in Japan, but it is what it is. People bought it, people liked it. He figured out a way to tap into pop music in a commercial way that arguably, even in the West, people haven't, even the worst pop music from Western countries, the way that they've tapped into ways to design melodies and songs and market. Johnny figured out just within Japan, arguably much greater, and he achieved much greater power around it. So, just for someone interested in Japanese pop culture, it is really important and relevant to learn about Johnny Kitagawa. But the first thing for me that I have trouble getting past is he should have been in jail. I mean, he should have been in jail for a long time. So, he kind of got away with it like MJ did. And that's kind of it. So there you go. The final thing. And yeah, Britpop I know has bad singers. But seriously, listen to AKB48 and listen to some SMAP songs, particularly when they break into the solos. They take turns saying a couple of lines on the solos, particularly on live shows, and they do it. They don't fix it. They don't fix it on purpose. They are out of tune. It's actually incredible. Final one. So I met this guy, Michael Howard, and he wrote a book, and it's kind of a book. It's a similar story to my own. He came to Japan in 2008. He wasn't a Japanese speaker at the time that he came to Tokyo, but he came to become a salaryman for 2 years and basically ended up staying here working in Japanese companies for a long time. And he did the hardcore salaryman thing. He was in a Japanese company without any context at the time before he came here. And, he sort of learned, he survived here for more than 10 years as a salesman, which, I could never do. And he's actually got a lot of great stories, I know, and he mentioned he was writing a book, and he's partnered with a manga artist who has illustrated the book, and I'm in the middle of reading it. It's available for free on Kindle right now if you want to read the ebook version of it. It's called Michael Howard, The Salaryman, when an American dude becomes a Tokyo white-collar warrior. I must admit, I kind of started a few chapters on a project like this myself, which hopefully one day I'll get around to doing. But this guy did it, so respect for that. And the book is good. The stories are funny, and it's really relevant. If you're thinking about coming to Japan or you've been to Japan, this is a great version of those sorts of stories. So yes, of course, I want to support the guy, so I bought the book. I'm reading it. I'm enjoying it so far. I'm going to put up a review of it when I'm done with it. But sorry, I just found this picture, and I hadn't come across this one yet, but that actually is quite a good picture. So anyway, it's a good book. I'm reading it. I'll give a review of it when I'm done, but I highly recommend it to anyone who is interested in it. And we're up on time. Well, that's 55 minutes in. I'm going to go back to watching the Cricket World Cup. I will come back next week and maybe do some tunes as well. Someone said, Butter, please don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry, Sergeant Bucco. Very good to see you. Thank you for coming back. I'm sorry I've been sick the last 2 weeks. As you can see, I got through the whole show tonight without sneezing and with my voice holding together and my throat not giving out, so that was a good thing. It is a holiday. It is beach day tomorrow, though it's not going to be much of a beach day because it is still kind of rainy season here at the moment. Andrea Molboy says, watch the episode on Asian Boss, Ari, the guy selling houses where people have died in them. I've actually downloaded that. It's on my downloaded to watch on the train list, so I will watch that. Thank you for the tip. And no worries, back to the tennis here. So everyone have a good night, and boom, peace. You shouldn't watch the cricket. New Zealand are playing quite badly at the moment. Well, I'm about to go and find that. And if we're playing really badly, that'll help me go to sleep. So everybody have a good night. See you next week, and keep cool till after school. Ka kite ano. Peace. See ya.